change with confidence. Have you ever wondered whether you were in the right career, right job for you? Have you ever thought about changing career, but never know when is the right time to do it? What would be the signs that would lead you to taking that plunge that seems to be so difficult to take, especially if you have a lot of recognition in your current career? The plunge seems even harder and harder to make. Today, I'm going to have a very powerful conversation with Joseph Liu, who's a career consultant. He's also a coach. He's a fantastic, that's an understatement, public speaker. He has a TED Talk himself. He has a podcast, and he does many talks around career change. He also focuses on personal branding, which is super helpful when you change career. He's helped me on a personal level. I've rebranded as a working mom coach over the last 2 years, and that's thanks to him. I think that is enough introduction from me. I'm going to invite him to join us, and I want to thank you for all your questions that you've gathered so far with us, and we will tackle them. I promise you we'll get through all the questions that we've received, and if we are missing some of them, we'll make sure to get in touch with you. So let me add Joseph to the line. Thank you. Hi, Angela, Lara, Chelsea, Simona, thanks for joining. Ask your questions if you have any. Joseph.
Anya, hello. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. In
Nice
this
to see you.
introduction that I just did, I didn't mention that you are also a father. And that's the reason why we decided to do the talk now. We after school run.
Thank you.
And
Yes, that was helpful.
exactly. That's it. You're back from the school run. And yes, that's something as well that could be another conversation, when we were talking about how, in certain occasion you feel like you're the only dad,
Sometimes.
doing certain of the activities with the children. And that's another topic for sure. But thank you so much for being here. And love to kind of to set the tone, because we have a limited amount of time ahead of us. And I want to focus, of course, on the questions that we've received up until today, which I've shared with you, which are not about, the before taking the plunge. What happens before you decide to change career and taking that plunge emotionally, and how difficult it is. But before we go inside of this conversation, could you tell us a little bit about your career changes and your career relaunches and what you've learned from them yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Tanya, for hosting this session today on this really important topic of not only career change, but also career change in the context of being a working mother, which I think is especially challenging and relevant. So just as a brief introduction, I think you covered most of it, but for those of you who maybe don't know me, I'm based in the UK, just outside of London, not too far from Tanya, although we've actually never met in person today, still somehow. And I'm based in Beckenham. I'm originally from the United States. I spent about a decade myself working in the corporate world. Like Tanya, I myself worked as a brand marketer for brands like Haagen-Dazs and Goo and Glad and Liquid Plumber. And then about 10 years ago, I made the plunge myself into working on career consulting, primarily focused on career change topics. So I'm a speaker, workshop, and webinar host. I speak primarily at business schools, but also do some corporate work for organizations, including Red Bull, Microsoft. I'm flying out to DC in a few days to go do some work for the World Bank. But also do career advising. So I do writing for publications, including Forbes and Fast Company. Don't do as much one-on-one coaching these days, but still do a little bit of that. And I also host a podcast myself called Career Relaunch. So that's me. Now, your original question. Good time.
It was about you in angle of changing career, and we could actually start answering the first question with that in mind.
Okay.
How did you know? What were the signs that you got yourself that made you want to change career before you took the plunge, basically?
Yeah. So I've had three major career changes. And the first was leaving medical school to pursue a career in marketing. The second was moving from the US to the UK because my then girlfriend, now wife, was based in the UK when I was in San Francisco. And then, as I mentioned, leaving the corporate world behind to start my own business. And so in each of those, I think there were unique challenges, but at the same time, there were some pretty common themes that came up for me. And I noticed the same themes tend to come up for other people who are also wrestling with whether now is the right time to make a change. So I'll just mention a couple, and then we can get into any other questions people might have. And I think they tend to fall into both practical and emotional things that you're wrestling with. So on the practical side, I'm a very practical, left brain, logical person. So I'm thinking, I've invested all this time into this particular career path. Practically, how am I going to make the pivot into something where I don't have any experience? How am I going to convince somebody else to take me on board when there's plenty of other people who might be more well qualified? And also the nature of unwinding everything that you've invested into one career to then redirect it into another. It just feels very daunting, which gets into the emotional side of things. And so for me, the signs that suggested it was time for me to change were actually more emotional than practical. It involved things like me just waking up in a bad mood, me not feeling energized by my work, dreading Monday mornings, not feeling proud of what I do, not especially enjoying describing what I do to other people. And I think the real telltale sign was when the dissatisfaction I was feeling at work started to extend beyond work, where my wife was telling me I was not a very pleasant person to be around. My friends were telling me I was grumpy and angry all the time. So those were just a few of the things that I noticed. And it's something that I hear from a lot of clients also.
Definitely. And I know that in the audience that we have today, we have a doctor who wants to relaunch her career into something more around the nutrition. And when we had the conversation earlier last week around that, she was quite fearful also of this idea of because she was successful in her previous job, relaunching her career, not only the fear of maybe that it won't work, but also, a bit of the imposter syndrome that she's starting something new at a different age. Because when you're just out fresh of uni, the world is your oyster. It's easier to start. You have nothing to lose.
Right.
But when you start relaunch your career at a later stage, I'd like to hear a little bit more around that, because we have a lot of working moms who decide to take the plunge after a successful career, and they're just really scared. There's a lot of fear. There's the money element, especially if they're one of the breadwinners in the family, and they're like, what if it doesn't work? So that there's the money element. There's the emotional element, which is tied to the money element. There's the aging concept and the imposter syndrome as well. So can you talk to us a bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're absolutely right, Tanya, that when you are further along in your career, there's more at stake. And so you're giving up more in your own career. You're letting go of more. That could be something more abstract, like investment of time and effort and money and energy. But it could also be something more practical, like salary, or you might be on the verge of getting promoted, or you might be on the verge of being vested into the company stock options. And so there's a lot more to lose, I think. So there's more at stake there. On top of that, just if you look at life stage, I know you specialize in working with working moms, you got a family, and sometimes you're the breadwinner. Sometimes even if you're not the breadwinner, you're contributing a significant amount to your family's income. And there's just a lot more at stake. And then on top of that, you layer on the imposter syndrome. What's really funny about imposter syndrome is it does sneak in for anybody when they are starting off with anything new. But what is then an added layer of complexity in your own mind is thinking that all your expertise is actually in another area, and other people perceiving that your expertise is in another area versus just having a clean slate as a fresh graduate. So then you've got to deal with that. And then you've got to not only convince other people, but you've also got to convince yourself that you have a right to play in this new sphere or domain, industry, role, company, where you, at least on the surface, don't seem to have the same qualifications as others. So it's a real challenge. And the first person you actually have to convince is yourself. That is oftentimes the hardest person to convince. After that, it becomes a little bit easier to convince other people.
And I find, being able to talk about how you feel in those moments to someone, you yourself, a coach, it just makes things easier in going to that transition and owning it and remembering when we had other type of challenges and how we overcame them. And sometimes, when there'd been a big career break, when you've had children as working moms, it's even harder to go back to work, because your mind and brain was 100% around the house and the family. And then you go back, even though you had a successful investment banking career before, and then you decide to go back in investment banking, which was the case of a client of mine. And it took her months to overcome this, and feel that she was actually as worthy as others to be doing that job. And I guess sometimes, and we know how imposter works, is even if you're the most qualified, that's when you feel like an imposter. It's sometimes when you're all even too qualified and you keep wanting to add degree to your degree. And I want to talk to the moms out there, and maybe you can add something to this around, this perfectionism element. So when, do we need, and that's the other question, do we need to be 100% sure before taking the plunge? 100% sure of what we're going to do next, what's the next career when we are currently in a job to transition to a new one? Do we need to kind of have it all figured out to take that plunge?
It would be nice. It would be nice, I think, to have it all figured out. And that is the irony. And I think it's sort of, this is what makes it so difficult, is the people who are out there who want to make career changes typically sense that something is off in their current career. And that could be just because it's run its course or the shelf life is up. But oftentimes it's because you feel like maybe I didn't make the right choice, or maybe I wasn't selective enough about thinking about which direction to go in. And then you're faced with making your next career decision. So there's this added pressure to get it right this time. And therefore, there's a huge desire to feel like, okay, I know this is definitely the direction I want to go in, so I don't make the same mistake again. The reality of it, and this is what I've seen time and time again, Tanya, over the past 10 years of doing this work, the reality of it is very hard to get 100% clarity on exactly what you want to do next. What tends to work better in the long run, and by better, I mean the people I see who take this approach end up actually making the career changes faster than those who are waiting for, I guess, the clouds to part and for there to be 100% clarity, is to take some broad steps, generally the right direction that you think is going to take you to a better place in your career. And you know that deep down, you may not get it right, and you likely won't get it right on that first step or two, but you know that it's going to be broadly better than where you are right now. And the people who take that attitude of, I'm going to try this out, I feel like it's probably better for me, I'm going to give it a shot. And then you kind of, a process of successive approximations, you find your way eventually. And I know that can feel really slow and cumbersome and almost unplanned, but it does tend to be what gets people further faster. It's not easy. It's not easy.
No. And when I listen to your podcasts, which I recommend everyone to go and subscribe to them, as you share the stories of people who relaunched their careers, their struggles, and how they made the plunge. And it's interesting because you go deep into what they do as well, and why they decided to do that and change career. You mentioned in one of your podcasts, I believe you did the doc from Pakistan, because you recently went to Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. You spoke about how for a lot of people, creating a time frame is very helpful. So, for instance, if you say to yourself, I'm going to see, let's say, if I'm going to ask for what I want in my current job. And then if it in 6 months time, I'm still feeling dissatisfied, then I'll take the plunge. Or I'm going to take the plunge now. And if in a year time, I see that I'm not making the money, that amount of money, or the money that I think I should be making, then I'm going to go back to the corporate world. Um, can you tell us more about how this has been useful to you and your client?
Sure. So I think what you're talking about there, Tanya, is creating a time limit on not only when you think you're going to make your career change, but also the contingency plan in case things don't work out well for you. And so I'll just take those one at a time. So first of all, you're absolutely right that this idea of creating some sort of whether you want to call it a tipping point or a milestone or a time limit on when you're going to make your career change is important. I think it's really important to define for yourself at what point will I feel comfortable making this career change? At what point will I know it's time to make a career change? It could be something on time. So it could be, hey, I'm going to give this corporate one more year because I want to finish off this project, or I want to get my end of year bonus, or I've got certain commitments, or there's certain financial responsibilities that I need to uphold. And so you give yourself a year, and then you decide after this year, I'm going to make my career change. It could be something a little bit more emotional. So it could be something like, okay, how many days of the week am I okay not being able to tuck my kid in at night due to my work pressures? Right now, I'm not able to get home on time for bedtime 2 days out of the week. Okay, my boss is asking me for 3 or 4 days for me to stay past 6 o'clock. Okay, so what's going to be your threshold? At what point will you no longer feel like your situation is tolerable? So that's sort of like a trigger point to allow you to make your career change. After you've made that brave leap to change careers or to try something different, maybe you go part-time, or maybe you start your own business, or maybe you just switch career paths and stay in the corporate world and work for a different organization. It is also useful to have some sort of a backup plan. And it might seem obvious, but it's very critical to have some sort of a contingency plan in place. So for me personally, when I left the corporate world, I had a very steady job, was doing, I think, reasonably well in marketing at General Mills on the Haagen-Dazs team. I wanted to pursue coaching professionally and full-time, but it seemed very risky. And I wasn't quite sure how even things like the income stream or me being able to just work independently, I didn't know how that was going to work out. So I basically gave myself a year. It's something I talked about with my wife. And if after 12 months, I wasn't earning a certain level of salary, if I wasn't feeling a certain level of energy for the work, I was going to go back to the corporate world. So during that year, I maintained relationships with marketing recruiters, gave them quarterly updates, and I assumed that that might be a possibility. And actually, ironically, what that does for you is it gives you a little bit more confidence to just go head in on this new endeavor of yours, to know that, hey, I've got a backup plan. And so even if this doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. And that instills you with a certain level of, I guess, confidence that you can then project outward to others. And it sort of creates this virtuous cycle. So it's a nice little comfort blanket to have out there for yourself.
I absolutely love the analogy of the contingency plan, and that works in so many ways. You've added the element of communicating with your wife and having this conversation with your wife. And that's also another key element that we tend to forget, especially when it's about, the financial aspect of things, and really having a sit down and saying, okay, what does it mean for us if, let's say, I'm not earning anything for the next 6 months or a year? And are you going to be okay with that? And sometimes just having that conversation is sometimes enough to take the plunge for some people, because we forget how much having the partner on board is key. And sometimes we just think, oh, he's on board or she's on board, but are they really on board?
Yeah.
And what does it mean for your family? What sacrifices will you have to make? Do you need to move? Do you need to go less on holidays? Do you need Will you have to make sacrifices, maybe not having a car for a year? Or it has to go into so much details. And I think we don't give that enough credit as well. And I have a lot of clients that haven't taken the plunge because of the money element. When they have a money cushion, it's much easier to take the plunge, and that's something we have to highlight here, for sure. I just wanted, before we move on, to say hi to Victoria, because Victoria's Otamir, she's there in the audience. She's introduced us, so I just wanted to say thank you. So you have friends that are your cheerleaders, and Victoria is somebody who's always challenged me. And we had a dinner, and she said, you need to speak with Joseph Liu. And that was a couple of years during COVID.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And since then, so I just wanted to say,
Victoria. Yeah. Hello.
So we're moving back to the next question, which was really much about, is it okay to take a break? I think we kind of covered this side of things, but is it okay to actually take a break? And I want to go a bit further down the line here, because the person who asked that question is a very successful corporate lady, and she's very loyal to her company, and she loves a challenge, and she has the, how do you say, the
prestige,
the prestige. Thank you. The prestige in her company, and it's a bit like, is it okay to take a break? How is this going to be perceived? Whether it's in the entourage, with the other people that she will meet. I'm sure that's something you've experienced yourself. So can you tell us more about this as well, please?
Yeah. So thanks for the question. I did see that in the prep notes you sent me, and I was thinking about this because, so a part of me would love to just come out and say, yeah, sure, it's great. Like, I think you should take a break, especially, I don't know the exact context of the break, but I'm assuming it might have something to do with motherhood and maybe balancing having some small children at home, or not. I mean, sometimes people are just burned out and they just need a break. I actually think that taking a break is really useful. It's just not everyone has the luxury of being able to do that. So first of all, the upside of a break, and then I'll talk about some of the challenges around it. The upside and the benefit of taking a break is it gives you some headspace. Actually, one of the things I talk about in some of the work I do are the 7 stages of career change. And one of those stages is reflection. Reflection is actually stepping away from your work, alleviating yourself from the daily pressures of your projects and deadlines, and giving yourself the headspace to figure out exactly what it is that is important to you and what it is that you might want to do next. And I have found that is very difficult to really fully devote your attention to unless you have enough just headspace and day to do it. And as a working mom or a working parent, you barely have time to go to the bathroom sometimes during the day or eat. And so on the one hand, the reflection stage and taking a break, sabbatical, even pulling back on the number of days of work, in theory, that can be really beneficial. In practice, what I have observed is it can actually create some issues, but it can sometimes set you back in your career. Now that may not be fair, and there's plenty of company policies, even country policies in place, where they're trying to encourage people to take parental leave, for example. I have spoken to plenty of people who have done that, who have been happy that they've done that. I've also spoken to plenty of people who have done it and have seen their careers still take a hit. And so in practice, I think if you're someone out there thinking about taking a break, it's just important that you realize, well, first of all, it depends on your organization. Find out, like, what sort of impact is this going to have on my career, if any? Maybe take a look at the other people around you in your organization to see what has happened to their trajectory if they've taken a career break. But to, I guess, be prepared and to perhaps accept that there could be a downside to it. And so the way I think about this is not necessarily is taking a career break okay, but is taking a career break something that would allow you to serve whatever are the key priorities in your life. And it's very difficult to have it all. So um, I was just talking with the working mother the other day, and she was telling me that in her organization, there are a lot of people who don't have kids, and leadership at the top are all men, and the parents around her, if they are men, maybe they choose not to be as engaged with childcare or parenting, and so somebody is investing a good number of hours a week into looking after her child. It's hard to keep up, just the sheer number of hours. You're just not able to put them in. And so, in some organizations, the amount of effort and sheer hours you put in does make a difference to your trajectory. So it's complicated.
Yet there's some organization that is key here. I was having conversations with actually two mothers in two competing American consulting companies, and they are both taking career breaks for different reasons. So one is the health, similar but different reason. Why is a health reason? She was diagnosed with a disease, and she had to take a career break from it. And the other one had totally overwhelmed, so decided to slow down in her career, and she was having panic attacks, etc. But the response of the companies were dramatically different. One of them was very accommodative of the situation, and is now welcoming her back even fewer days a week, and it's not having an impact in her career. If anything, they're really helping her relaunching her career. She's also done some courses during her break, and she wants to focus more on that front. It's coaching as well. It's similar to coaching and health, linked to what she went through. And the other one, it's the opposite. They're asking her to come back full time. They're asking exactly. So it like you said, some companies, and it's understanding what they're willing to accommodate or give you, and what you're going to lose as a consequence. And that's such a good point, right? What can you lose? Because it's working 70% instead of 100%. I don't know if you read the article of the Glamour editor, Deborah. She speaks about how now she's found that the best way to navigate working mom life is to just show up 70% of yourself and not 100% of yourself. But I think what's missing here is what you said, is that some companies will allow it, but some others won't, and then you're out.
Yeah, it's not fair. Okay, I don't think it's fair. I really don't. I feel like I mean, again, we're talking about working moms here, so and I'll just focus in on that it tends to be, and you can look at statistics on this, read plenty of articles in the Financial Times about this. It tends to be, and this happened during the pandemic, that the bulk of the burden of childcare, or not burden, but responsibility of childcare, tended to fall on the mother. And so women are disproportionately affected by these choices of a parent having to pull back on their work. So is it fair that mother get penalized for that, whether explicitly or just implicitly? No, it's absolutely not. It's just important to understand the reality of how some organizations work, and it's not to say it's the right way to do it, but it's just it's important to take a hard look at how your organization behaves, and whether the choices you're going to make are going to allow you to do the things that you want to do in your life and your career.
Thank you for saying that. And I believe you had shared an article also about the reality of childcare, and the cost of living, and how mothers were kind of forced out of their careers to go back into the household. So the career change without a choice, basically. So thanks for highlighting these important topics. And just kind of bounce back on career change. what if, career change is not the right decision to make? What if you just need a change in your company? And it could be, you could say it's still career change, but let's say it's a internal change in your company or more flexibility. How do you know the difference, whether it's a full U-turn or just some small changes that need to be made in your current job?
So taking the approach of tweaking rather than making wholesale changes to your career is definitely a really solid strategy. So I actually think that that's a good place to start, because making any major career change that completely upends your career and your life, it's a lot more disruptive and it involves more risk. Although there's a lot more upside potentially, but I do think that from a very practical standpoint, it can be useful to make some tweaks. So when I think about the components of a job, you've got your location, your organization, your function, your exact role, and your industry, you can make tweaks to just one of those at a time. So just using your example, Tanya, let's say you work within an organization and you're actually happy with the organization and the culture and the product or service that you're working on or initiative that you're working on, but you just the setup of work isn't working for you, and being able to work from home 1 or 2 days a week would really help you tremendously. I think that's a good place to start having a conversation with your manager. Or maybe you're working in a function or role that you really love, but just the culture of your company is not in line with your values. So then maybe you stick with your role and your function. Let's say you're like a finance manager at a bank, and maybe you go to a different bank. And so I think these small tweaks can actually make a tremendous, potentially positive impact on your life. And it's a good place to start before you make the change. And the way you can tell is those tweaks feel a lot less daunting. Those tweaks are things you can have a conversation with your manager and see if you could open this up for yourself. The bigger changes are the ones that feel a lot more daunting, involves more people, will upend your life more significantly. And that's how you can tell.
For sure. And I know that also, again, some organizations make that conversation easy to have. Some managers are more welcoming in having those conversations. And when I left investment banking, I didn't feel that it would be okay to just tell my manager I'm overwhelmed by the rhythm of things and I want something else. I think have changed now with it was a long time ago. It was 2011. So things have changed and evolved, but in some places they haven't really changed and evolved. And for instance, I have to say another client of mine, she did more than 100 interviews internally before changing role. She was in investment banking, and finally she managed to get a job in private banking. She moved countries, but 100+ interviews in a year. I think that's someone you should have on your podcast, because had the resilience. And honestly, there were moments where she was losing hope. That what is actually wrong with me? Why aren't they giving me the opportunity? I've been in this company for more than 15 years, and it's so hard for me to change internally. I think the reality of this makes career change even harder, right? For working moms or for anybody that's looking to change career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for people listening to this, it's you and I are talking about the challenges, not because we're trying to necessarily discourage people, but it's to, at least my intent is to normalize it for people, is that if this feels hard, if this feels unnatural, if it feels disruptive, sometimes it might even feel illogical. That is because that is just how this is. Like, changing careers is difficult. And at the same time, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, because if you do pursue it, and if you do make the effort to try to seek out a more meaningful, well-balanced life for yourself, or whatever you do more for, it's definitely worth it, because there's a lot of people out there who just continue to tolerate their current work situation. And you can tell when you talk to them, and you can feel it when you're with them. And you just have to ask yourself, like, how long am I willing to tolerate this? And at some point, you have to do the difficult thing and actually put in the effort to make that change happen. It's difficult. And, but just because it feels difficult doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It can still have a tremendously positive impact on your life.
Thank you. Thanks for that conclusion. And can you share with the audience, with the listeners, how they can connect with you, and if there's anything you want to share about what you're working on currently?
Sure. Yeah. If you are thinking about this topic of career change, it's something I write about a lot. It's something I care about a lot. So you're welcome to go to josephliu.co and you can check out my work there. Tanya mentioned the podcast. That's the Career Relaunch Podcast. And Tanya didn't tell me to say this, but I would also encourage you to think about finding someone who can actually talk about these topics with you, because I think it's a very individual, personal journey that you're on. And Tanya specializes in working with working moms, and as someone who knows her, she's someone who's a great sounding board for these sorts of things. And so I would also check out her work, because I actually don't specialize in working with working moms. Tanya does. And so I would, whether it's her or some other coach or some other external objective sounding board, it's useful to talk it out with somebody. It can be incredibly illuminating to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. I know how difficult it is when we have to make a decision, right? We want to make the right decision.
Yeah.
Is there really a right decision?
Yeah.
In the long term, maybe, right? But in the short term, it's difficult to say it's the right one.
Yeah. And just one more thought on this is this whole concept, right? And the whole concept of trying to make the right decision and do the right thing for yourself and do the right thing for your family and be, as you mentioned earlier, kind of the perfect, whether mother, employee, business owner. There's a lot of pressure that people put on themselves. I think especially women tend to do this, and it's okay to not get it exactly right, and you probably won't, because most people don't get things exactly right the first time. And it can sometimes be liberating to just know that even if you don't make the right exact career move the first time, if you maybe, you miss a couple key kids events at school, it's okay. It is very difficult to be in all places at all times. So it's just important to think about your career in chapters, think about what chapter you're in. And in terms of defining what's right, think about what you want for your life, like what's important to you personally and professionally. And that's how I would define what's right move is.
Yes, that's the best place to start. Thank you so much, Joseph, for taking the time this morning. I thoroughly enjoy chatting to you, our coaching sessions, and you as a person. And I'm looking forward to remaining in contact and continuing the work with you.
Thank you for having me, Tanya. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks for joining.